Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our December 19th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler. Of course, we're just on the cusp of Christmas and a new year, so it's fitting that we're looking ahead in today's episode. Up first is Joe Kerns, who's well known in these parts for his ag market analysis and great advice. Then, we'll bring on a trio of young ag professionals to talk about one of the real highlights on Farm Bureau's yearly calendar, and that's our Young Farmer Conference, which will be held January 27th and 28th in Des Moines. Let's start with Joe Kerns, who shared his market outlook with Farm Bureau members on December 7th during our annual meeting. Afterwards, spokesman reporter Bob Bion tracked down Joe to recap a few of the highlights for you and our other podcast listeners.
We're here with Joe Kerns, president of Kerns & Associates, to talk a little bit about ag markets. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's start with a broad overview of the ag markets in general. What can you tell us about the ag markets today?
Two things. Number one, they're fairly priced, given price relationships and regressions, especially when you take inflation into consideration, as well as I really like the prospects of profitability for nearly every sector in agriculture, both the agronomic as well as the livestock side. I think we've got a reason to be optimistic, given where we sit in the structure. And even from a livestock side of it, you're going to have an elevated cost of feeding, which is good news for the agronomic side, of course, which means the price of corn and soy stay relatively elevated in consideration of their recent trading ranges here. And at the same time that we in the livestock sector get enough revenue that we're able to pay the bills and put a little jingle in our pocket at the same time. So I think it's a very healthy state as we sit.
More specifically, let's talk about the grain markets. Where do we see it now and into the future?
So you've had a little bit of a pullback, and I'll start with the corn market here. You've had a little bit of a pullback in the corn market. I think that the option expiration of the December contract that occurred at the end of November brought a lot of liquidation to the market. We were unable to breach that $6.50 level on the downside very much whatsoever. And so as soon as you took some of those artificial parameters out, you established an environment where everything could kind of sag just a little bit here. And you've seen that. You've seen corn lose 30 cents so far in the month of December. I do see us kind of steadying out right now from a world perspective. I think we are fairly priced, if not even a little underpriced, given some considerations of Argentinian production looks to be overstated, in my opinion. European production is overstated. We have a complete lack of exports right now that's weighing on us as we sit, but just kind of the promises of what may be in some countries that are laying in the weeds that need product that haven't booked yet, and that's namely China. I think will start to sustain us the last half of the year as far as exports. Big pieces we haven't been able to deliver, whether it's rail and or the waterways, have not been performing very well, and so we shouldn't be surprised that we've seen fewer exports coming out of the United States. A huge piece of that's the value of the U.S. dollar. I think a bigger piece is logistics.
And how about soy?
Soy side of it is, in my opinion, just kind of static as we sit here right now. We had talked during the presentation a lot about the increased crush capacity that's coming onto line and what that's going to mean for acreage needs, even starting as early as next year. I think the soy side of it is going to go through a huge transition of price appreciation in order to garner the acres that might be a little reluctant as we sit right now. We've got a drought in the western side of the United States, perhaps a swapping of La Nina to El Nino that might help out some winter wheat acres that then could transfer into some soy acres at that point in time. But I do think that the soy side of it will become the lead dog based on just the demand that we're going to see out of these new processing locations coming up over the next 2 to 3 years.
So let's transition to animal agriculture. Where do you see that now and into the future?
Every sector, sans maybe the broilers right now that are experiencing some profitability. Broiler guys had some reproductive issues that had plagued them for the last couple of years, seem to have solved that, and over the last few months have overproduced, and now they've tapped the brakes on production, trying to get the prices back in line. The layer sector has been beset by HPAI, as have turkeys, so you've got record values on both the value of eggs. That's what most of your consumers obviously could pick up when they go to the grocery store. Turkey prices also remain high to the point where a lot of that disappearance is even into the Jersey Mike's or the Subway type chains have either supplanted their turkey offerings or eliminated them altogether, which is unheard of. But we're not going to be overrun with turkey. We're not going to be overrun with eggs. Those two things don't seem to have any cross elasticity whatsoever. Broilers, I do think, kind of bop along at about break even. Pork side of it looks to be light profitability in 2022, a little bit more optimism for 2023. Wean pig prices are also starting to increase markedly, which would tell you that we're probably not going to be overrun with animals. And then beef is probably the one that's going to be the lead dog out of that. This drought that we've had in the western United States has mitigated some production to the point where I think that beef becomes the driver as far as prices, and every other species tries to grab a coattail.
Yeah, so you touched on the drought. Huge concern.
Yes.
We're in the third La Nina year, actually. Where do you see the drought effect going in the future and the effects on ag, specifically the beef industry?
So I think we're going to get a temporary reprieve. We're in something that I was sharing with the group called a negative PDO, or Pacific Decadal Oscillation, which is a generational event, a 20 to 30 year cycle. And we're near number 4 of that. You'd share that we're transitioning from La Nina to El Nino. That would historically bring a little bit more moisture to the western United States, and specifically to some of those cow-calf pasture grounds, and maybe even to the human population that certainly needs a recharge of reservoirs on some of our more populated cities that we've got out west. But the general tenor and trend will continue to be dryness in the western United States relative to where we'd like to see it. And I see the cattle inventory falling, or at least moving back toward the Midwestern producer.
Where do you see overall grain and animal production moving?
I think we're pretty static, actually. So we'll have increases in yield that are inspired by these higher prices. And so farmers that are economically motivated, which hopefully we are, will respond with whether it's nutrient density, whether it's planting density, the choice that we're making in our seed genetics in order to maximize output, because we're going to make some pretty good money. So I don't see any acreage being committed. Over time, we continue to lose acres that are committed to row crop agriculture as we shift population base and start to encroach on some of those acres. So I don't see any increase in acres. I do see some increase in output just based on the deployment of some of the technologies that we had that was simply waiting for prices to get high enough so we could start to institute some of those changes, and we're there.
You touched on high input prices, high input costs affecting grains, fertilizer. There's some worry about acquiring needed fertilizer. Your thoughts on cost and availability going forward?
We're going to be tight. I don't see huge price spikes, but I don't see any relief either. And so if we're kind of this $1,400, $1,500 a ton for nitrogen kind of, and then everything else falls in line, I think that's, if I was putting together a budget for the next couple of years, that's what would be my baseline. One of the concerns that we're going to have is the fewer barge loads of grain that we put down the Mississippi River means fewer backhauls of fertilizer on the backside of that there. And so as we start to take a look in an environment that might be characterized by $6, $7, or even $8 corn, is we're going to have an economic, compelling story in order to fertilize that ground to its maximum output. And if we have a lack of physical product to lay down, it's going to start to cause a little bit of a chasm between desire, supply and demand, literally, is what it is. So I think that's something we need to keep an eye on, is exports of grain out of the Gulf generally equate to a backhaul of fertilizer to the Midwest.
You also talked a little bit about massive changes coming to the ag sector. Could you please elaborate on that? You talked a little bit about volatility going forward.
Well, volatility, and I think you got to put this in two categories, is number one, the intercommodity volatility, which I do think remains pronounced as we kind of waltz through an era that's marked by whether it's sustainable aviation fuel or renewable diesel. We'll have a couple of massive transitions that are going to occur. And then as a backdrop, the general geopolitical economy, most poignantly as we sit right now, is this Russian-Ukrainian war that I think starts to throw several question marks into the equation about what are energy prices or energy availability across much of the world. The other piece that we didn't have time to talk about today is the human impact, is mass famine that you could certainly see as a role with less developed countries that don't have the financial resources to compete with the more wealthy countries. And they might not look like us or speak our own language, but they're still human beings. And I think that's a consideration that we're going to have to give a lot of weight to from the humanitarian component.
There was a lot of discussion about renewable fuels, specifically renewable diesel. Where are we headed with this?
Well, that boat's left, as we're going to increase our crush capacity someplace in the neighborhood of 600 million bushels per year. This is the largest transition we've ever seen in the soy processing industry. The extraction methods have been around since the 30s. We've perfected them, and it's really kind of funny because if you go into a new plant, the physical machinery is probably very similar to 1970 of what we've done. So I think we've refined this process to the point where we're getting the maximum oil extraction, and we know how to handle the byproduct, in this case soybean meal, that we're going to gracefully transition. And I think that the industry has chosen a winner and a loser, and it's the soy farmer is going to be the winner simply because of the characteristics of soybean meal being so diverse that we know what to do with it. It's got a very fine amino acid profile for most protein accretion species, specifically the bird that has the need for sulfur amino acid in order to maintain a feather coat. I see us as being complementary to one another, just in a bit of a different era than we've had with soybean oil being the main driver and all of a sudden soybean meal becoming the residual.
Joe covered a lot of ground there, and of course he had even more to share at our recent annual meeting, where he spent more than an hour dissecting ag markets. And that's the thing. We love bringing you some great insights here on this podcast, but sometimes it's pretty hard to beat the in-person experience. That's definitely true when it comes to our next topic, the Young Farmer Conference. Every year, we welcome hundreds of young farmers and ag professionals to Des Moines for our 2-day conference, packed with networking, educational sessions, and entertainment. If you're a young farmer or ag professional, it's something you really do need to experience, and next up, we have 3 guests to tell you why. One of those guests is Megan Hansen, who you may remember from the October 31st podcast episode. Megan and her husband farm in Pottawatomie County, and Megan's the current chair of our Young Farmer Advisory Committee, which oversees the creation of the Young Farmer Conference agenda, along with Farm Bureau staff like Mickayla McGill, an ISU student and intern who also helps coordinate the conference. Megan and Mickayla recently met up with Jenna Smith, who's an ISU student and the intern in our marketing department, to discuss the Young Farmer Conference and why you need to be there on January 27th and 28th. Jenna takes it from here.
Today we have Megan Hansen and Mickayla McGill. And to start off, I would just like to ask you guys to tell me a little bit about the Young Farmer Conference, who attends, what goes on, and where is it held?
Absolutely. So the Young Farmer Conference is held every year. This year it is the last weekend of January. It will be at the Iowa Event Center in downtown Des Moines. Activities are Friday and Saturday. We will have speakers, we will have workshops, great networking opportunities with young farmers and fellow Farm Bureau members.
Yeah, the Young Farmer Conference, despite the name, is not only open to farmers, so it's open to any young professionals in the agriculture industry or college students, anyone who falls in that 18 to 35 age range and is a current Farm Bureau member is able to attend.
So, as I've never been to the Young Farmer Conference, so if you had to explain what the Young Farmer Conference is to someone who has never attended, how would you do that?
Yeah, so what I tell people is it is really a workshop-filled weekend. There's speakers that are motivating, inspiring. There's workshops that you can implement on your farm if you are involved in production agriculture. If you're a young professional, there are great workshops that help you with maybe financial planning, personal development, just learning about what is going on in the ag industry, hot topics right now. We bring in speakers for that as well.
All right, so Megan, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but why should Farm Bureau members attend this conference? What will they get out of it, and what kind of sessions do you think will go on?
Yeah, so Dan and I have been attending since, we kind of go back and forth every year, but he thinks he's been attending since 2009. I think I attended my first conference in 2011. So obviously we enjoy it. We come back every year. And for us, it's not only getting ideas as to what is going on in the industry each year, if that's grain marketing, what's going on in the livestock industry or anything like that. but it's networking that's really important to us and we value. So it's seeing maybe those friends from college that we don't get to see that often. It's making new friends and connections with people that are really at the same stage of life that we are and understand the challenges that we may be facing and also are there to celebrate really our big victories that we have each year.
A lot of the topics that we'll be covering this year at the Young Farmer Conference will be kind of broken down into breakout sessions. So we've got lots of different things scheduled there, including some that are on livestock feed, current markets, farm taxes, along with some on preserving foods and making easy meals to send out to the farmers in the field. So a variety of topics for anyone interested in the agriculture industry, along with we do industry tours that first day of the conference, that Friday afternoon, and we'll be touring a couple facilities at Iowa State along with the National Animal Disease Center and behind the scenes for the Iowa State Fair.
Sounds like there's a lot going on in those 2 days. That's crazy. Knowing that both of you guys have attended the conference in the past, what would you say is your favorite part and why?
For me, as a mom, now it's getting away and unplugging, but also recharging. So it's figuring out what we can do to improve our farming operation every year. It's seeing friends throughout the state and just having the opportunity to really fine-tune what we're doing. And every year I walk away with some sort of tip that I can take back home. If it's easy harvest meals or meals that we could implement at home or ways to improve our bottom line.
For me, I've been able to attend the conference the past 2-ish years. There was the COVID year that I didn't come, but I attended first as an Iowa FFA state officer, and for that experience, it was getting to connect with people in the agriculture industry, local farmers, Farm Bureau members who had supported me throughout my FFA journey, along with some industry professionals. It was a very good opportunity to network with people within the industry, and then last year stopping by to see the conference and kind of meet up with some old friends was a great way to build new connections and connect with people who were exploring the agriculture industry, just like me. So for me, it's definitely a networking experience to be able to make connections and, like Megan mentioned, reconnecting with old friends.
Yeah. I actually plan on attending the event as well to kind of help with whatever's needed, and I'm really excited to attend. It'll be my first time, so I'm sure I'll get a lot of networking experience out of that. This year's theme is Our Roots Run Deep. So why did you guys decide on that theme, and what events throughout the 2 days relate to that theme?
Absolutely. So the Young Farmer Committee meets in the summer, and we really do some brainstorming on what we want this conference to look like. And so that includes the overall theme that we go with. And so our Roots Run Deep is really acknowledging that in Iowa agriculture, we have a very rich history. If that is the ag industry in general, on how much we have improved and as technology has grown, or if it's acknowledging that someone may be the 5th, 6th, possibly even the 7th generation farmer coming to the Young Farmer Conference, acknowledging that we have those deep roots. But if we think about the tree and it's growing, we have that growth potential as well.
I think the theme also connects to our ability to kind of gain knowledge from others around us. While we have the breakout sessions and the industry tours and the speakers who we're gaining knowledge from, a lot of that knowledge comes from learning from those around us, whether you're a first-generation farmer talking to some experienced farmers to gain some information, or an industry professional wanting some hands-on experience. This conference is a great way to kind of soak up those nutrients, for lack of better terms, and using an analogy to kind of gain new knowledge and expand your operation, get your start in the agriculture industry, and just learn from those around you.
So it sounds like both of you have had a huge role in planning this event. So based on the conference schedule and speaker list, is there anything in particular that you are really looking forward to?
I think we have a great list of workshops that are planned. The topics are a very wide variety, anything from managing livestock in a pasture all the way to soil health, and even carbon credits are on there. So we have a wide variety of things that everyone should be able to find something that they're interested in, and I think it's a great lineup.
For me, as the Young Farmer and Leadership intern, I've had a big role putting this conference together, and specifically I organized all of the tours for the conference, so I'm excited to see how all of those pan out and what our members are able to gain from those different experiences. And for me, I think that's what I'm looking forward to most, is just seeing how those tours help our members.
If a Farm Bureau member was interested in attending this event, where could they go to find what's going on at the event? Is it online anywhere or on Facebook?
Yes, so it is. You can find it on the Iowa Farm Bureau website, and there are several links on social media, if that is on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and eventually maybe we'll see something on TikTok as well for the conference. And then as a Farm Bureau member, you can reach out to your local county office, and they will be able to help you get registered for the event as well.
If you don't know where to find that contact information for your county, you can go onto our website, and under the Young Farmer page, there's a registration button. That'll pop up a list of all the county information. That way you have the correct phone number or email to contact your county to get registered for the conference as well.
If a Farm Bureau member wants to get more involved, what opportunities are there for them?
Absolutely. So while we're at the conference that weekend, we will also have some breakout sessions where we get into groups based on the location of the state that you live in. So you will get in a room with people that live with you locally, connect with them, talk about local events that will be happening in your area throughout the year. And then also, and this is really how I got very involved with the Young Farmer group, is we will have our discussion meet competition, the initial rounds at the Young Farmer Conference as well. So the discussion meet is just like it says, it's a discussion. The questions are provided. It's really informal. It's just like having a committee meeting around really a kitchen table or an office table that you're discussing some sort of topic that is important to agriculture right now. And it's a great way to improve your communication skills, think about critical thinking, have a cooperative attitude when you're in a meeting setting, and it's just a great way to practice, because as we're young farmers, we're going to be the next generation of leaders that come into Farm Bureau. So it's really preparing us for that opportunity.
For those who are looking to get involved in leadership positions, we do have 3 of the current Young Farmer Advisory Committee positions coming open. Mm-hmm. We will be selecting those new members at the Young Farmer Conference, so there'll be some more information coming on our social media pages about which districts will be looking for new representatives, and that's a great way to get involved on a leadership role through Iowa Farm Bureau, and that is a 3-year term if anyone is interested.
It's definitely 2 days well spent if you're a young farmer or ag professional. You can find more information about the Young Farmer Conference and get registered at iowafarmbureau.com. We've also included a link to the conference page in the notes for this episode, so you can click there after you're done listening here. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. On behalf of our Farm Bureau staff, I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas, and we hope you'll join us again in 2023 when we release our next episode, January 2nd. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.